A date has been set for the trial of former US President Donald Trump on charges of trying to overturn the result of the 2020 presidential election. It will be on the 4th of March in Washington, D.C. That is one day before Super Tuesday, when more than a dozen states vote in the Republican primary to pick a candidate for the 2024 presidential election. Mr. Trump has since said in a social media post that he'll appeal the trial start date, though legal experts say that is not usually possible to do so. Lawyers for Mr. Trump have already tried to have a date moved back, as our correspondent Sean Dilley explains.
Donald Trump's legal team had hoped to push this trial back until April 2026, whereas the prosecution said they were ready to start in January next year. Both dates were unacceptable to Judge Tanya Chutkin, who said that 7 months would be the appropriate time. The defendant was entitled to reasonable time to prepare, but that's not unlimited. Now, the trial has been set for the 4th of March. It's always possible with any trial that could slip for some reason, but at the moment that would be scheduled for the day before Super Tuesday, when various huge states, including California, go to the polls to vote for their favoured candidate for the Republican Party and Democrat Party nominee. In other words, the candidates who are going to face off for the White House next year. Donald Trump hit back pretty quickly on his own social media platform, Truth Social, and he said that he'd be appealing the decision. He called the judge in the case biased and Trump-hating, and he suggested that she and Jack Smith, the lead prosecutor in this case, were attempting to interfere with the election. This is just one of 4 criminal cases Donald Trump has on at the moment. We know that separately, in the unrelated election interference case in Georgia, the president's first date, his arraignment, is set for the 6th of September next week, and that's an opportunity where ultimately a guilty or not guilty plea can be entered. But we do know that Donald Trump has denied fervently all of the charges against him, saying that they are all designed to keep him out of the White House.
Sean Dilley there, who's in Washington for us. Well, I also talked to Eric Schickler, who's Professor of Political Science and co-director of the Institute of Governmental Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and he told me what he made of this date, March the 4th.
I think it's certainly interesting, coming the day before arguably the most important day in the Republican primary. But it's not necessarily clear this will hurt former President Trump in that primary. It draws attention to him. It focuses attention on what he has claimed to be the abuses by the Biden administration, which, while many are skeptical of, a lot of Republican primary voters believe.
But in the weeks ahead of Super Tuesday, he will be involved, won't he, in this trial if it does kick off on March 4th? I mean, whether he likes it or not, he'll have to focus his attention on that.
Yeah, there's no question it's an incredible distraction for him as a candidate. On the other hand, this is somebody who's already, incredibly well known. Voters have really firm opinions about him. And so it's not necessarily that clear that, he needs to be out there campaigning day by day as long as he's in the news. People get their news from cable, watching cable, from social media, and he will be dominating that in the lead up to the trial.
In that case, is it detrimental to the others who are trying to get that nomination?
Well, I think it just dramatizes the tough strategic situation that most of his opponents are in, because on the one hand, they certainly want to be able to make the case that Trump has too much baggage to successfully win the White House against Joe Biden. On the other hand, for the most part, candidates like DeSantis really do not want to alienate Trump's supporters by seeming to lend any legitimacy to these prosecutions.
Many are, of course, analysing this. What does it mean for the 2024 election in the United States, et cetera, et cetera? There's a lot of conversation about those who are undecided, those in the middle, i.e. those who are not supporting Trump and those who are not necessarily supporting Biden. They're going to make their mind up next year. How does all this going on, all these trials, et cetera, impact those voters, do you think?
Well, I think that it's much more likely to have an effect in November with these kinds of swing voters than it would in a Republican primary. That's where literally 2-3% of voters, deciding essentially this is just too much trouble, too much noise, to have another 4 years of it, that could really be decisive in what many expect to be a close election.
Eric Schickler there, Professor of Political Science from the University of California, Berkeley, with his take on that story. So much more on our website. Do take a look. It's really interesting reading.